My parents were horrible with money. I'll be flat out honest about that. I had no mentor, so I had no one really to talk to about money, right? Failure was not an option. I really worked my butt off for many years. Probably two books that was a good influence, and it's not necessarily financial, was
What's up? This is Bobby Hoyt with Millennial Money Man. Welcome to the inaugural episode of The Money Shop. I'm super excited about this. This is something that I've wanted to do for 5 years now. I wanted to do an interview podcast for a very long time, and I've teased about it multiple times. And now we've got the team to do it. So, I'm basically just, the podcast concept is simple. I'm just going to be bringing on people that are just interesting people in the personal finance space, and we're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about building wealth, and we're going to talk about paying taxes and paying off student loans and just all the things with money. But it's going to be a relaxed conversation and just try to, dig deep and really find out. I don't want to hear the talking points that people have as they're trying to grow their brand. I want to hear the real stuff, the real story, and we'll just see where the conversation goes. And maybe we crack open a beer or pour whiskey, or maybe we don't. We just kind of hang out and drink water, But that's the goal of the podcast, is just to get to know people and tell real stories and hopefully teach people through that process. My first guest, Larry Ludwig of LarryLudwig.com, is a really good friend of mine. I've known him for years now. He's actually part of the Millennial Money Man team. And I wanted to kind of test this out on somebody that was part of the team, so I wasn't just wasting a random guest time with tech issues and stuff like that. But it turned out really, really well. I'm super excited about the interview. I hope you enjoy it. Larry's story is basically that he drives a Porsche and he has a Mercedes and he's got an Escalade. But not really. That's not the story. The story is that he had InvestorJunkie.com. He sold it for $6 million. I want to say back in 2018, but we'll talk about it on the podcast. And we talk about a lot of things, like how he got into money, just how his parents and how they dealt with money. And we talk about what it's like to pay taxes on millions of dollars and what it's like to make millions of dollars in some lump sums. And we talk about horse betting. We talked about everything. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. I really enjoyed it. And if you have any suggestions or anybody that you want me to interview, just let us know. Shoot us an email, hello@millennialmoneyman.com. Yeah, we'll see if we can get them on. So anyway, thank you. Enjoy the episode, and welcome to the Money Shop. What's up, buddy?
Hey, Bob. What's going on?
Oh, I'm just here using you as a guinea pig for the first podcast episode. I figured if I could start with anybody, you're the first. And I figured if I could start with anybody, it's somebody that's inside of the organization that isn't going to be pissed off if the recording is bad.
What organization is that? The Fight Club or some other unknown organization?
Okay, dude, I don't know if people know. You're a big guy. I think if there was a real fight between the two of us, I don't think I would win. I'm not gonna lie to you. I would try my hardest. I would do everything I could, but you're what, 6'3"? 6'3". Yeah, that's good for you, man. That's congratulations on that, by the way. That's
awesome. I could thank my parents for that one. I couldn't really help with that.
Yeah, welcome to the Money Shop. You're the first one. Way back in the day, back when I first got started, which was only 8 years ago, I had a good friend that his name's Jim, and he would tell me, basically he was a family friend of my wife. He owned a business, he owned a swimming pool company, and I used to go to his pool shop when I was kind of starting out, and I didn't know anything about money, and he just started teaching me things about money, just very slowly started talking to me about student loans. And then I'd go back, and we did a lot of water skiing and stuff together. So we just kind of hang out and crack a beer open and start talking about personal finance and business and investing. And it really changed me a lot and taught me a lot. And then I kind of went into this whole weird personal finance world after that, just because I got so excited about talking about money. And I realized a lot of people don't have that kind of stuff. They don't have, they can't listen in on conversations between people that either have money or building wealth or building businesses. And so that's kind of what this podcast is. We're just going to talk about stuff, and it might go in a bunch of different weird ways. And then I'll try to pull it all back together at the end. But that's it. So you're the guinea pig, dude.
Ironically, I had that same scenario, except I had no mentor, right?
It's just you talking
could definitely talk about that. What?
Was it just you talking to yourself? What are you talking about?
Meaning, yeah, exactly. I was, no, I had no mentor, so I had no one really to talk to about money, right? My parents were horrible with money. I'll be flat out honest about that.
Yeah.
That, when my father died, his pension died with him. And that really, I mean, that was before I made it really successfully as far as a business owner. I was not unsuccessful then, but when I realized how much debt my parents had and just the issues with money that they had, I kind of made a promise to myself not to have the same issues, my parents had. And it's always been said, either you become your parents or you do the exact opposite. And in my case, I want to do the exact opposite. I love them to death, but they were just not really good with money. My father, bet, the OTB, which is a off-track betting, which is a horse racing here in New York.
I didn't know
And
that.
my mother was like expecting some money to be in that account, and it came out to be like 37 cents or something like that. Just to show you how much he did not have. He always was betting on horses. I mean, he wasn't a gambler in the true sense of like had an addiction, but he was not really betting. I mean, he was not really saving his money for a rainy day, and he was pretty much living for the moment. And my mother did the same thing, and that really had while they looked really financially off, looked successful. In truth, they really didn't have much in terms of investments, and that's again why I decided to go down this path and really learn about this stuff at a really early age. I was in college, with at the time Quicken, learning and really managing my finances, while all my other college friends were like looking at me with a strange face, like, "What are you doing?"
Right. Were you balling when everybody else was like broke in college?
When you say balling, I had a job. I worked in the computer department at the college I worked at.
Were you already investing? Were you already going down that path of like did you know that you were going to be a wealthy person in college, or were you still trying to figure it out? Like, how early did you know?
I was determined to be a wealthy person in college.
Okay.
Meaning, I graduated comp sci, computer science from Clemson University.
Yeah.
And so I knew from a tech, STEM major, I was going to do pretty well. But there's no guarantee with anything. Again, you see people that make six figures or more, and still have nothing to speak of. So money or income per se is not necessarily an issue. It's how you deal with it. In college, I actually had some investments in college, but I had from a prior accident about $10,000 that just for savings was awarded, and that was my nest egg, if you will, which I spent most of it on my last year of college, in fact. So I really didn't have that much per se. I mean, obviously, we all start off at different points in life in terms of where we are, as far as the goalposts. But that being said, I don't know. I mean, I was definitely determined. I think would be the better way to look at it. I didn't really have much to speak of in terms of money. I came out debt free, which is obviously a big issue. Especially nowadays with college education, what it is. My oldest is getting ready to go to college, and just the expenses, just the amount of money it costs is ridiculous. And made the promise to all my three kids that we'll definitely make sure we'll cover those fees. So I want to make sure they're debt free. But back when I went to school, the example of being Clemson was only, it was maybe $8,000 a year, $9,000 a year. Now I just went there because my son's considering it as well, and it's almost $40,000 a year. Mm-hmm. So it's not cheap by any means.
No.
The stakes are much higher. But anyway, getting back to my story, I was determined to make sure that failure was not an option, and I really I really worked my butt off for many years.
What year was this? Like when you said you saw what your parents did, you saw that they were betting all their money on horses, and then you
they weren't betting on horses, but they weren't saving the money. They were living the good life. They had the presence of a nice house, nice cars, but really didn't have anything in terms of investments. Right. Really very little. And that was a wake-up call when I was probably sometime in maybe my junior year of college. So this was probably like 1991-ish.
91. Okay. So because I'm trying to think, like, for me, like, when I started learning, like, I learned a lot. I said, from the pool shop and everything, but really I started not blogging. I started looking up things on Google, and like I found Jay Money from Budgets Are Sexy. He was the first blog, one of the first blogs I ever found. It was him and Aaron Lowry from Broke Millennial. And I didn't even know blogging was a thing, but I was like looking at it and I was like, wow, okay. And I started learning about saving and budgeting and just kind of filling in some of the gaps of knowledge that I had. But like,
Well, ironically, that stuff didn't exist when
that's what I was about to
1991.
ask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there was Susie Orman, of all people.
Oh, yeah.
There was financial books like that, and there were radio talk shows, right? There were AM radio, at least in the New York area. There were AM financial talk shows on the weekends or even weekdays. So I literally listened to everything I could get my hands on: audiobooks, radio shows, read books, you name it. There was really no internet. I mean, the web was in its infant stages at that point, so there was really there were maybe forums you could discuss money on, but they were very minor.
Was Dave Ramsey doing his thing back then?
No, I think he became popular late 90s, if memory serves me right.
Okay. So like Susie Orman, these video or these talk, I can't even believe it, like AM talk radio finance shows. That sounds, I might have heard one of those maybe once in my life, but it sounds terrible. But like, what were they?
Well,
what was are there good ones? Do you remember any good ones from back in the day?
Well, there was one guy that was doing a pump and dump and actually got arrested by the SEC. What the heck is that guy's name? It'll come to me at some point.
FM
but
radio pump and dump.
He did a pump and dump for at the time cellular towers.
Oh my
and
gosh!
Got caught by the SEC and got fined and went to jail.
That is wild.
So I was listening to financial advice to some guy.
So, was it good advice though? Like, was he actually doing like good stuff?
Well, again, I'm of the mind. Well, obviously, in retrospect, probably some of it no. Okay. But that being said, look where I had no person to really look towards to get good financial advice, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously nowadays with the proliferation of the internet, you can get much more advice. I mean, good and bad advice on the internet just as easy.
Yeah.
So that being said, was it good financial advice? I mean, no, but it at least helped me go down a path of learning more about finance and money, right? That was my goal, is to really look at different sources. Like, I don't consider Susie Orman a good source for me, but yet I learned something from her. So, I mean, her mantra always was max out your 401k, max out retirement accounts, where for me as a business owner, it's probably not the best strategy, right?
Right.
Where she's really much more the bread and butter, work a 9-to-5 job, maybe it made sense to do those things that she recommends. Where if you're an entrepreneur or business owner, it may not be, the best advice in the world.
So who is your favorite person to listen to back then? It wasn't Susie, it wasn't the pump and dump guy. Or was there a book? Like, I mean, I'm trying to get, I don't know.
Let's say, I would say in terms of the books, probably two books that was a good influence, and it's not necessarily financial, was Tony Robbins, which obviously talk about scams or pump and dumps. I mean, I've met the guy, I've interviewed him, been to multiple of his seminars.
You interviewed Tony Robbins?
Yeah, when I had Investor Chunky.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Sorry. Go on.
So his books were inspirational, again, that you too could do it type of thing. And then probably even, again, another person that has questionable background is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki.
Man, he's a good follow on Twitter. You follow him on Twitter these days?
I do.
That's such a wild
I just saw something
account.
about Airbnb he posted. I didn't get a chance to finish reading it.
Oh, it's so tough with him because I love that book. That's one of my favorite. That was actually, I think, one of the first personal finance books that I read. And I loved it because it was just it just resonated with me a lot. And I was like, I totally get this. And then you jump off to Twitter and you watch what this guy's talking about and you're like, oh my God. Like I don't know if he's just gotten so old that he can't even be that old. Like, I don't know what do you see what he talks about?
Yeah, I've listened to his radio show multiple years.
Okay.
I've listened to his show. He's actually been interviewed by other people. I mean, there's things that he's definitely way off base. But they're I mean, the problem, in the end, I guess, with any of these people, I'm not a fan of listening to any one guru, right? That's really what it comes down to. Tony Robbins, without question, has its issues. I mean, I know lots of things about him personally, and just his overall story and just the issues I have with some of the stuff. But I take some of it, what he says, with a grain of salt, right?
Sure.
But he's inspirational. There's things that definitely you can get out of his seminars or his books that, will help you move forward as a person. Same thing with even Robert Kiyosaki. Even what was the guy's name? Something Block. the radio host that went to jail.
Oh,
In the end, you could always get something out of their what they have to offer. In the end, definitely understand not all they say will be true, and there'll definitely be issues, and some of it may be very applicable only for them.
yeah. Yeah, I can see that with Kiyosaki. Well, someday, if this podcast gets big enough, I'd love to bring him on and just be like, dude, what is going on Twitter with you? Like, you're talking about like sardine cans and like the wildest stuff possible. And it's like, buy gold, economy's crashing now.
Well, he's been like it for years.
I know, it's just so wild. But okay, so it wasn't Susan. I mean, so you basically were just reading books and you were just kind of like gathering knowledge from FM radio.
I mean, I literally read probably 50 books, if not more.
Dang. Okay. What was the biggest piece of advice back then, or like what was the current theme? Like right now, it's like index funds. Today is kind of an actually interesting.
Well, index funds have been around for years. I mean, as far as that discussion, same thing with active investing. I mean, they seem to definitely go through cycles. Same thing with these, like, I mean, it'd be funny if you read a book from the, say, 90s on financial and the interest rates you could get on, say, CDs. I mean, we're kind of going back towards that,
Sure.
present day. But, for many years, I mean, how many of your generation or younger have not seen a CD rate of 5% or more?
I think what's happening right now for my generation is a very shocking thing. I think they're like, how could this happen? These interest rates, I don't know what is this? And I remember, I mean, everybody, like Jim, the guy that I was talking about, like, he was like, interest rates when they were low, like when they were really like, 3, or even a little bit lower than that, he was just like, you have no idea like what people were dealing with in the 80s and, like in, prior decades, like these are nothing. And I think for people my age, it's a big eye opening, like, wait, like money's not just cheap. Like you can't just get free money for like doing everything you want.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge shock for your generation. I mean, not for me so much. Even for some of my generation, right, there who were involved or understood finance or really watched it, because I used to watch it for many years, even prior to when I started, becoming of age and on my own. I always was interested in finance and investing and just things about money. I'd watch the news shows and they would talk about, today the GDP or inflation rate or, unemployment, shit like that always would just interest me as a child. So I've always had, as an interest for this. I just full disclosure or discussion, I used to own a blog called Investor Junkie that discussed all this stuff. So it was perfect match for me. It merged my technology skills with, discussing personal finance investing. So it was perfect for me.
Yeah. Investor Junkie, rest in peace, right?
Yes, rest in peace. It's gone, but not forgotten.
Sorry for your loss.
Well, it's not my. I mean, on one hand, I got paid to not care about that, but on the other hand,
Sure.
It's hard if you're trying to discuss any consulting. Like, here's the former blog I used to own that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's tough. And it's funny because that's actually how, like, I want to get back to your kind of like your come up a little bit, but like that's how I really got to know you. Did you know that before we were in a mastermind together and before, like, I don't know, just we started working together and everything.
You were
like
stalking me?
No, I wasn't. I just met you 2 times. I met you 2 times, both at FinCon. The first time Grant just brought. We were at a bar. I don't remember which FinCon this was. But he's like, you got to meet this guy, Larry. He's got like a computer brain. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, but he's like, this guy's
in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, this guy's the smartest guy I've ever met. And so I don't know, we had a drink together or whatever. I think the other time you were talking to Michelle Schroeder, at the FinCon, like, I don't know, the party thing they do at the end. And you were just talking to her, and I came up and like totally interrupted that conversation and then walked away. So that was like the only interactions I had with you prior. But yeah, and then you've helped us build our whole thing, Isn't that pretty cool?
Yeah. I mean, thank you. The funny thing is I've been always fascinated about technology too.
Sure.
Like, I've had these different paths as a child. I'm kind of discussing with my oldest son, what he's going to do. And he wants to ironically study computer science, as well. He wants to be more of an entrepreneur, business owner. So we'll see how this goes. I think he's perfect as a salesperson, but we'll see. Where I was at probably 12 years old, I knew I wanted to be in technology. I was really young age. And, my wife has the same, she knew at a really early age she wanted to be a nurse too. So that was kind of it definitely helps to know, ironically, I do tech today, but in the same notion, it's more than just tech. It's applying the technology and understanding how it can be used in real world situations. I've had friends over the years who were enamored with tech just for the sake of tech. And, application of it is really key. There's been many techs I've looked at over the years and go, this sucks, I'm not going to use it. One example, as a recent of discussions is EVs, electric vehicles.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan by any means.
What?
Yeah.
For people that are listening, Larry is balling out of his mind with the cars. He's a car guy. You got the Porsche.
Yep.
And then we've got there's other, don't be embarrassed about it. It's okay. You got the Porsche and you've got the Escalade. And then I don't know what your other car is.
Mercedes.
Yeah, dude.
S-Class. Yeah. So, I have very expensive taste. It's
but
like
that's
fine
cool.
wine.
Yeah. You got to like something. Did you know that you were going to like cars like that when you were young? Like, were you into cars at all? You were into tech. You were into finance. You were into cars too.
I knew I was into cars too. Meanwhile, my father could not change an oil. I definitely have gotten more the mechanical skill. My father was really into sports, actually. He was what do they call it, three-letter man or whatever it's called, like you're just baseball, soccer, and baseball, football, baseball, basketball,
football. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll get the three. So it's ironic, meanwhile, I was horrible at sports. Sports is not my thing.
Sure. Do you think that you were the opposite of your father, do you think we do that? Because I see myself do that kind of thing too. Like, did you see yourself doing that on purpose, or you think it's just like a natural thing that kind of happens?
No, I didn't. No, not at all. My father, if anything, wanted me to be in sports. He encouraged it. He wanted me to do soccer, basketball. I sucked at all of it.
Right.
And just knew it was not my thing.
And your dad wasn't an entrepreneur either, I'm guessing,
no.
Right?
Well, he always wanted to start a business, but no, he never did.
That's actually really simple. Did he talk to you about that a lot when you were a kid? Because my dad talked to me a lot about he wanted to start a restaurant forever, and I remember he's got a job that he really enjoys now, but I know for forever he was like,
for the audience, your father's literally a rocket aerospace engineer.
Yeah, he works at NASA. He's a what is it called? Russian interface officer. I don't want to butcher this because I don't want him to listen to this and be like, he doesn't know what I do. But he handles communication between for the International Space Station between the Russian side and the U.S. side, because there's a lot of collaboration there. So he gets to sit in mission control. He speaks some Russian. They have a translator too. So because you really can't, when you're dealing with that kind of cross communication, and it's there's a lot of importance in the words that are actually said. You can't mess it up. So, but he does, and he goes over to Russia, periodically. So that's actually been a big part of my life. He went to Russia for months at a time when I was a little kid. So, yeah, he's in the rocket field for sure. But what was I talking about? I can't remember what I was talking about. We gave it with a non sequitur.
Would I want did my father, or did I try to do the opposite of as far as money-wise, yes. In terms of sports,
entrepreneurship.
Tech, yeah. No,
that's right. Yeah.
It was not. My father, did he encourage it? Probably. He was probably more, if anything, for that is concerned, he probably was trying to live through me, my entrepreneurial dreams I had at an early age. When my exit interview for my college, the head of the computer science department asked me, what did I wanted to do, and I told him I wanted to start a business. And, sure enough, I was set out to do that.
Did you imagine yourself going into the server business for internet, internet server
web
business?
Hosting?
Web hosting? Yeah, that too.
Well, I had, there was definitely other cockamamie ideas I had in the 90s. The web was just starting off, and I probably worked a job a year, literally. I would rotate jobs and get a better salary every year from when I graduated to, finally starting my own. 99.
Jeez. But okay. I want to back up though. I know you had a career prior to web hosting, and I know that web hosting sucked. So,
it certainly.
But Yeah, but so you got out of college, you went in and you did just a bunch of different jobs, but you were at one place for a while, right? Didn't you have like one place where you were?
If you consider maybe 2 years, 3 years.
You were turning over that much? That's wild.
Yeah, I'm well in the tech field,
Oh, is
especially when you're
that?
starting off, you can easily do that.
And was that purely just was it because you were bored or you were just trying to get higher salary?
Combination, a combination of three things. I think higher salary, bored, or wanting to expand my skills, and just hating, in some cases, the company I worked for.
That was a common theme. The
Yeah, I mean, the motivation to want to, like, screw this, I could do better.
Yeah. I mean, was it like that you didn't like to work for people?
Yeah. I still have that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, dude, that's why I quit my teaching job. I couldn't, it's like every time somebody told me to do something, it was like nails on a chalkboard, which kind of sucks. I mean, I think that,
Well, it's not necessarily being rebellious for the sake of, like, it's not being, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like, it's not trying to be stubborn or defiant. It's just that
yeah.
in some cases I'm looking at my boss going, he doesn't know that, I'm not going to curse. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing, but, I could do better.
So, okay. So you hated work. I was the same way. I hated it so much. And I feel like I was a terrible employee because of that. Like, I think that just the fact that, like, it was hard for anybody to tell me what to do. Like, I look back and I'm like, it probably sucked to work with me or for me to,
on top
be managed.
of, being a school teacher, right? In your case, you have a lot of not only, the management, the school board, what have you, working with, but also just a lot of rules and regulations that the state and, the state.
Oh, dude, I had like 7 bosses. Like, that was the wildest part. It was because I worked at 3 different schools. And so I taught high school.
Wait, 3 different schools at once, or?
Oh yeah, all at the same time.
Wow.
So my job, I was a band director, but my job I was the high school band director and I taught percussion. So I taught the drums. And then I also taught at 2 middle schools that were like feeder schools. Like, those kids went up into the band as they went into high school. And so I taught them percussion as well. So, like, the idea is that you have like a fully integrated, it's like they have like all the skills that you teach them, then they come to the high school. And it's like they've got a foundation that goes all the way through. The problem with that is that you actually have to stay in a job for more than the 3 years that I stayed in it to actually like see that come to fruition, like where the kids that are young like actually become, But yeah, I was working at 3 different schools, and so I was like, I didn't like being told what to do, and I had to navigate. Like, I had 2 sets of middle school like directors that were above me, and then I had to deal with their principals and assistant principals, and then I had the high school, and I had like 3 assistant principal bosses, and then the principal,
Yeah.
and my head band director. So it was like a very strange. I was dying in just hierarchy, I guess.
And
I don't
again,
know.
plus all these regulations you had to deal with too, from the
Oh,
state.
dude. Yeah, teaching stuff, man. I don't know how anybody does it. To be honest
Well,
with
you get summers off.
Man, I didn't even get the summers off. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's how they they don't even try to lure you in. I mean, I think a lot of people that are good people try to teach. It's just,
No, I'm not against teachers by any means.
oh, I'm not
believe
even.
me.
Yeah, I'm not either. I mean, I saw some bad teachers too, but like,
Well,
man, it's such a hard career. And I think it's something that, it's a hard career and you just don't get paid very much. And that's just the reality of it. Like, it sucks.
I don't know in your neck of the woods in Texas. In New York, they get paid pretty well.
Yeah, they got the unions up there, right? What do you think they get paid?
It's all
let me
public
look this up.
information. I mean, there are teachers from my school district that easily make 6 figures.
Okay, average teacher salary. I'm my own producer, if you didn't notice. Average teacher salary, New York. So,
And it might
dang.
be less. It might be less upstate too.
My God. Average, I was looking at 83,738 in 2020. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's some of these people that are pushing 6 figures. Now, granted, you're living in New York, so I don't know how far that goes.
Where I live, they're easily making 6 figures.
Wow.
Almost most teachers after like 4 or 5 years.
I made, I think it was like $53,700 or something like that my first year teaching, and that was extra because I got a stipend for being a band director. So I think the starting salary was like 49, And it hasn't come up like, let me look at that. Like
Yeah, it's probably
average teacher salary
55
Texas.
now.
Yeah. Let's see, 56, 116. So, and that's 2023. Man, that's tough. That's tough living. I mean, you can do it, but man, that's for the amount of hours worked.
I wouldn't want it. I mean, and geez, obviously this is the 90s now, so with the rates, the salaries would be much higher. My first job coming out of college was 25,000. Probably would be worth maybe 45-ish.
Okay, so you weren't like, well, you probably felt like you were swimming in money though.
At the time,
right?
yeah, I was single and
Yeah.
had no expenses, and yeah, it was great. I mean,
Yeah.
now the average, you probably would make coming out of college, 60,000 in computer science,
Yeah.
which is not bad at all.
So you bounced around from, I mean, I don't know. Can you explain real quick what computer science even is? Because I like loosely know just because I've talked to you about it before, but I'm sure there are people sitting here, they're going to like, what is
My
that?
son's asking the same question.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, you're learning about the foundations of computers, right? There's different computer majors this day and age, and some of them are more business-based or informational-based. And computer science is really getting into the crutch of how computers work, really the foundations of things like the von Neumann architecture and Turing, Alan Turing, one of the founders or principal fathers of computer science, modern-day computer science. And understanding how the architecture works, right? Understanding what it can do and, more importantly, what it can't do, right? Computers are limited, even though people are talking about AI and how AI is definitely evolving and growing, there's still limitations of what computers can do.
Okay.
Something that's abstract or creative, a computer can never do, as an example. Computers are still primarily, even with AI, are still primarily logic-based.
So, I mean, was it your knowledge of that made you want to go into starting a web hosting business?
I started with the web hosting business because it was, in the end, people needed to host their site somewhere, right? They needed, a business, blog. Well, this is even before blogs. So people needed to host their stuff somewhere. They need a business because of hosting your own server back then. You physically had to, set up a server, put in a data center, right? I literally had, servers my first server was basically a tower computer we put in a data center. And you had to buy it, you had to, set up the hardware, install the software, and away you go. Nowadays, everything, of course, is very cloud-based. So it's you just, go to some provider like Amazon and away you go. Back then, that was not possible. So it was very costly. It was a sucky business. I was going to say the S word. It was a really sucky business because of it's very resource intensive. You need a lot of hardware, and you're constantly cycling hardware, maybe every 4 years before you have to get new hardware. And it just where really the value add in the end, anyways, was the software, the administration, and that's kind of where I saw the trends in the late 2008, 2009. That cloud computing was the future, and not to say that I did do some things to try to get into it, but still it's a commodity, right? In the end, people didn't want to spend money for hosting. They rather, even though there's a lot of things to put into it in terms of making sure it kept up 24/7, people just looked at it as a commodity, which it is.
Yeah,
there was not
I
much
hate
money
dealing
to
with
make.
it. Yeah, I'm always I'm always talking crap about the hosting that we use, and it's probably great. I think it's like great, but I'm just like every time it hits the account, I'm just like, dang, I don't want to pay for that. So you did that for how many years? Because I thought you did it in a pretty short period of time, but it sounds like you did it for a
No,
while.
I started in 2000. I started in 2000, really 99. Even before then, really 1997, 1998, part time, and it was the original side hustle for me. And from that, eventually went full time. 1999, went through a bunch of partners as well, business partners, over the years, and was solo in 2003 on my own with no business partners until really I didn't shut it down until I sold my other business, Investor Junkie, in 2018.
Oh, you were running.
I just
both of
literally
those?
let it slide for about 8 years.
Wow, you're letting it go for that long. That's
Well,
a long
it was
time.
all automated. I had minimal staff to help with support
Okay.
tickets and whatnot.
Do you remember that moment when you went from, so you were like full-time job and then you were doing this on the side. Do you remember that moment when you went full-time into entrepreneurship?
Well, ironically was very nervous for all the wrong reasons, meaning I was even getting business partners to help fund the business at the time in 99, where I was working at the time for a company called Commerce One. Mm-hmm. They were a hot internet startup based in, not based in Walnut Creek, California, so not the Valley, but close.
Yeah.
And it was a B2B company. It was really, the valuation of the company when I left before it went public was like $7 billion or something crazy. And meanwhile, internally, I looked at the revenue numbers. I'm like, how is this thing worth $7 billion? And they went public, and I actually did pretty well with the IPO because I was no longer worked for that company. And then, meanwhile, I had friends who had shares and never sold, and literally had these what's called phantom taxes they had to pay for options they owed money on.
Dang.
So, anyway, I went full time with a business partner in '99, and at the time was nervous because I was looking like, do I want to leave this opportunity I have working for this startup, doing at least appeared on paper to do really well, or should I start my own business? And I was nervous because also what happens if it fails and stuff like that. Meanwhile, I had no wife, no children, no nothing, very little expenses, and nervous for. It was stupid. It was stupid to even think about it. I mean, I grew as a person long term, but it was just, in retrospect, why was I getting nervous over something that really, what do I have to lose?
Did you already have revenue coming in? Yeah, you were doing it on the side. So you were So did you I don't know, did you have like any panic attacks or anything like that? Do you have any like bad, because you quit the job? Because I know what it feels like to quit the job, and that feels probably pretty good usually. I don't know if you felt that way. I was ecstatic.
On one hand, they wanted me back. They actually asked me to come back, and I'm like, I did for a little bit, for about a month actually.
Oh wow!
So I reneged. Leaving. That's right. I completely forgot about this. I reneged on my leaving for about a month, and then they had me because the one thing I did not like about this job was I was literally traveling the world. I didn't know from week to week where I was going to be.
Oh, okay.
Constantly going to customer sites to do their installs and setting it up, working with the client. And I didn't know where I was going to be. So I had no social life to speak of, which I did not like. And, at the time, what was it, 28, 29, not to say I was necessarily wanting to settle down and get married and have kids, but, I was realizing I'm certainly not going to have any dating life if I'm traveling all the time.
No, I couldn't imagine that. I mean, what were you traveling for? What were you doing?
It was doing customer installs. So I was installing the software and consulting the client at each install. I was in Europe for multiple weeks. I was actually in Walnut Creek, California for many months at a time. That was my second home at the time I was working for that company. So I was all over the country, Tennessee, where else? New York, of course, here in New York. But it just was hard. It was very difficult to be like my friends would, call me up going, "What are you doing this weekend?" Well, I don't know. I have to travel somewhere. So it was hard. It was rough.
And this is pre Investor Junkie?
This is 10 years prior.
Okay. So you did that. I mean, it sounds to me like you ran this business for a while, and then you kind of got bored with that, and then you saw blogging maybe kind of start coming into the picture.
It wasn't necessarily. Well, the story is, and I've written about this through email sequences on my own personal site. The genesis of creating Investor Junkie was I was very frustrated with web hosting and also consulting. I was doing other people's blogs.
Sure.
And in fact, there's actually a somewhat famous blogger at the time was doing very well on my system, my services, and I'm getting treated basically like crap from them. They're like blaming me for things that really had nothing to do with my service.
Do I know who this person is?
What?
Do I know who this person is?
No, they're not a personal finance blogger. They're actually, what's the name of the blog off the top? I can't think off the top of my head the name of it. But it's a very well-known blog that actually originally was on my servers.
Okay.
And they're very well-known now today. But that being said, I was not happy with the owners. They were treating me and my business not really well with respect, thinking, again, going back to the commodity issue with hosting, that,
Sure.
We don't need you, we can find another provider. And that's kind of where I was like, I got really frustrated, but also that's where the light, they say in times of frustration is really when you should seek or think about new opportunities. And I think that definitely was the scenario. So I remember very specifically that this was December of 2009, December 4th, I think is when I registered Investor Junkie, if memory serves me correct. And it was just really frustrated with this business of mine. The business really owns me, right? I would really be difficult for me to go on vacation where if something failed, I would have to always be on call.
Yeah.
I was successful enough where we made money, but in the same notion, wasn't large enough where I couldn't relax. There was always be something going on with the customer service or server issues or just something going wrong. Mm-hmm. And I had to tend to them. So it was really difficult for me. And it was really stressful. If you really want to talk about panic attacks or stressing out, that was probably the most stressful time of my life, actually.
Just that you couldn't be off.
You were always on. I was always tied to some cell phone or computer. I had at the time, Wi-Fi or internet was really hard to, be at vacation spots. So I would always have to ask if they had Wi-Fi or a way to connect to the internet. It was difficult. It was a really difficult time for me. And on top of that, I had one child with another child in the way at the time, and just was like, this is not right. This is not working.
And that's how you got into the blog?
That is how I got into the blog. I mean, initially I created the blog. I was like, you know what? I'll create it. I don't know if it's going to, before the genesis of it actually was, this is kind of ironic. And it's ironic because I'm also friends with that person today. There's two sites. One of them I'm not friends with, but Bankaholic.com was the first site that was sold. It was sold to Bankrate.
Okay.
And was sold for, I think, $12 million. And it was literally one guy and making money through affiliate revenue. And that kind of was when the light bulb went off, right?
Right.
That I'm like, well, if this guy can do it by himself, literally a one-man show, and build a business out of it, why can't I? And ironically, also Get Rich Slowly, J.D. Roth, who I'm friends with today.
Gotta love J.D.
Also saw his blog. What?
So you gotta love J.D.
Yes, one of the OGs, original
OGs.
I
hope to have him. I want to have him on this podcast.
Yeah, he makes even me an OG in his case. Yeah. So that being said, wanted to not replicate it. I realized that you can't do exactly what they did to be successful, because also J.D. Roth sold his blog too for undisclosed amount of money. Yeah. And I think 2010. Something like
Probably. That sounds about right.
I forget the exact. I have it on my own website. I think it's 2010 he sold.
Is he still not allowed to? I should ask him this when he comes on. But is he still not allowed to talk about that number? It's like very, very secretive.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of have an idea what it is, but I'm not going to disclose it. Let him.
Yeah, don't say it on here. But yeah, no, maybe offline.
I'm not going to say it in public. That being said, it's ironic. When he spoke, I forget who else was. It was Harlan from Consumers and Commentary, and who was the third person that all sold their blogs? Was it Jim Wang?
Probably Jim.
From Bargaineering, I think it was. It was all three of them.
I'm pretty sure it's
And I saw them at FinCon, in FinCon's financial conference in 2012. I saw them in St. Louis, I think it was. And they all were sitting on stage where they sold their blogs. That's kind of where it hit me like, I want to be in their scenario, whatever time frame, 8-10 years from now.
Okay. When did you sell?
2018.
Man, what did it feel like when that money hit the account?
Well, it came in phases. So you're right. Are they going to give us when's the next deposit coming? Getting a little nervous there. Like you gave your, because there's a transfer of ownership, and that you literally, there's a point where you have no physical control over this, business anymore.
Right. And,
will they make the final payments?
That's probably nerve-wracking.
It is a little nerve-wracking. That part's nerve-wracking. Even though even if there's an actual escrow,
Sure.
You still, it's just numbers in a bank account. It's, it's not like you're giving physical dollars to, when you sell it. So
Yeah.
that being said, it's all just a transfer of electronically. So you're nervous in that sense. It was great. On the other hand, it was the whole situation of selling was very surreal because one is I definitely talk about going back to Tony Robbins and planning things out and dreaming and thinking about things and envisioning how they are. I definitely am a believer of those type of, you definitely write things down because I did a lot of that, visualizing things as well. It really does help turn your visions into reality. I can definitely say that without question. That is something magical. I don't know exactly what that is, but it definitely helps fine-tune and pinpoint what you're going after with very much precision. That, if you go aimlessly without it definitely, and not to say you can't be successful without vision or goals, but it definitely helps in the end.
Yeah, the kids these days call that manifesting.
Manifesting.
Yeah, but I mean, I believe in it too. I mean, like everything that I've done so far, it's like you have to sit down and you have to see it, and you have to believe that you're going to do it. It's pretty crazy. It is weird how it works though. Like it's a very strange thing how it's like you imagine that this thing's going to happen, you see it, you obsess over it, and then everything in your world just starts to the gears start turning and you start making decisions and everything kind of points to that. It's really interesting how that happens.
And again, I had that stuff since college where, I mean, there were definitely things that changed along the way, right? I definitely was flexible in my approach.
Sure.
But in the same notion, was able to achieve things that, once I dreamed of and they turned into reality. And again, it was surreal when I finally got the Porsche. I bought it even before I was able to afford it without issue before I even sold. And It was definitely something I, wanted always to have. And again, yes, it's materialistic, but it's much more than that in the end. It's more about, the manifestation of your visions and your dreams in the end turning into reality. That was really what that still represents to this day, is that, obviously it's enjoyable to ride and enjoyable to use, but it's much more about in the end the symbolism, what it represents to me.
Right, like the hard work and sacrifice and all of that.
That too. I mean, that's I'm not going to lie to anyone. There are a lot of days where I wanted. In fact, actually, with Investor Junkie vlog, I wanted to quit 1 or 2 times. There was about a year and a half in where I almost gave up.
Man, what if you had?
And the interesting thing was, it was where I just had to change the approach. I was not doing well with traffic. I was not monetizing very well. And again, I created this blog initially just to showcase my technology. That was the worst case scenario. Let me show what I can do for others and help them consult. Worst case, that's what I'll get out of this thing as an experiment. And it turned into much more of a business and/or a profitable business into itself. And it is interesting. This is one of the things I even wrote a blog on my own site about. We can definitely talk about this.
Yeah.
Is one of the things I have a problem with a lot of personal finance experts, and it's a good segue from what we talked about before, is a lot of business owners, a lot of people like Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, even Tony Robbins. They talk about how they get wealthy or how you could get wealthy by investing. Do these steps. If you only saved more and you're getting your Frappuccino from Starbucks, you would be a millionaire by 30.
Yeah.
Which in the end is just totally crazy because that's not how they got wealthy.
Sure. They started businesses.
They started businesses in the end.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of what, with Investor Junkie, I started a business in the end. That's how I got wealthy. It wasn't because of, and not to say you can't be stupid with money, right? In the end, you can do very well. A lot of business owners, unfortunately, can do very well financially or, monetarily wise. But then when it comes to investing and preserving that wealth, once you make it, do really poorly.
Right. Right.
But that's not how they made their money. The thing that's so fascinating is they'll discuss. That's definitely one thing I can definitely, as a good takeaway, that even though I learned a lot about money and finance really early age, in the end, really the way people make money, at least to me, the way most people can stand a success to make money is through a business. That I think a lot of people, and that's not to say everyone should be an entrepreneur or everyone could be an entrepreneur. But that being said, unless you're, very good athletically, which I wasn't, Very
Right.
good with music. I'm not. My intellect is really what my skill is. Understanding that was my skill. I'm really good at technology, and how can I leverage that, in this case, in the business? And that's kind of what I took it all at. So in the end, don't listen to what a lot of these financial gurus tell you to do, and really just watch what they do.
Right. Who do you think is the best one right now out of all of them? Are there any?
I don't really like any of them, to be honest, for the most part. I mean, if anyone I would probably like is MJ DeMarco's "You Millionaire Fastlane,"
Yeah.
because he espouses that type of mentality. And again, not everyone. The one thing that really I don't like about his messaging is it's much more. He's like more. Everyone can start a business, and in the end, I think not everyone can. There's definitely. I was of the mindset initially too that everyone could, but it definitely takes a certain mindset.
Yeah.
It definitely takes a certain way of thinking, and some people are better suited for it than others. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie. There were times where it was very stressful, very, very hard to run a business at times, and there were definitely times I wanted to give up. Like I said, about even for
Sure.
Investor Junkie, for that matter. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah, I think you have to be built a certain way. Like I think that, but I do think everybody should try. Oh, maybe should is a little strong.
yes,
I don't know. I think that if you're not happy in a day job and you think you should be an entrepreneur, I think you should try it, because you'll find out very quickly if it's for you or not. Like you have to kind of be wired a certain way to do it. And especially when you do, like, I think there's like levels to it when it comes to the stress part of it. Like, you can run a lean business, you can do what I'm doing, or I'm hiring full-time employees, and that's a whole different level of, not
Of stress.
Well, stress sometimes, but but it's just it requires a different, it's just hard, but there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But I think it really can, you can try. I've seen people try it and go, yeah, that's not really what I want to do. And then they go back to a normal job and they love it, where they at least know, it's like that.
yeah. If you have that entrepreneurial itch, I suggest to do it, right? And especially do it younger than do it older. That's not to say
Yeah.
the only, like, again, I was stressing out when I was single and had no dependents. For me, where reality is that's the best time to do it, right? It's
Yeah.
definitely easier to do it before you get married, before you have children, because the stakes are higher. That's not to say you
Yes.
shouldn't or shouldn't try if you really have that bug and you've never pursued it. But it definitely helps to have a spouse that's supportive, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And my wife always has been. But I had a business even before, so it definitely helps to understand the ups and downs. And she, if anything, her steady job, her good income has helped us along the way as a family too.
Oh,
So that's good
yeah.
too.
Yeah. Did you have health insurance from your business, or have you always been on your wife's?
No, I always had it through my wife.
That is the worst. I think that's probably the worst thing about being an entrepreneur, because like when I quit my job, we were on my wife's teaching insurance, and that was not good, but it was better than nothing. And then she quit her job when the businesses started doing better, and then it was like, man, the options suck for health insurance. It's
in
really
some ways
bad.
it's been better since Obamacare, and in some ways it's been worse.
Yeah.
The prices
Yeah,
have gone up, and the options have decreased, or the quality of the options have decreased over time, which is no surprise. That's a whole other topic.
yeah. Yeah. We'll
But
talk
that being
about that at
said,
some point.
it's nice that you're not necessarily tied to. There are more options today to get insurance.
For sure. We did the health share for a while, and that seemed cool until we had a kid. It's like all those options seem like really cool, and when it's just you're like young and you're like in your 20s and all that kind of stuff, like those things seem like they could work really well. But then you have a kid and you realize like, oh, this is what it's like to have medical expenses. Like,
Well, even if you're young, in most cases you don't have health issues, right?
yeah,
That
yeah,
when you start getting into your 30s or even 40s, it just usually start having health issues usually start creeping up.
yeah, yeah. We're on a private insurance now, which is actually seems to be good. I mean, it's definitely better than the health share. And then we're also looking at like health plans for companies and things like that. And we're not quite there yet, but we're we're looking at it. But man, that's the hardest thing. If you have a spouse that's got a good job, like that's the way to go. I think that's the best way to try entrepreneurship.
It definitely helps. I mean, and in my case too, I've always ran a very lean business, right? It was pretty, and I did that purposely. I mean, meanwhile, I had an employee. She was like, "Why don't you have more employees? Why don't you have a bigger staff?" I'm thinking, from prior experience, I don't want that.
Yeah, it's a different world. Definitely, because I ran like an all contract team in both businesses for a long time. It was just last year, I think, that I started hiring full-time employees, and it's like, man, it's a different game, and you definitely have to. It's a quick learning curve. I think that the potential for how far you can go becomes a lot higher, just from a revenue standpoint. But you've got to learn how to not only manage people, but like manage people's desires, or not even understand people's desires. Like, how do you motivate people?
Yeah.
It's been a very interesting thing.
It's interesting. There's a client of mine, or former client of mine, that they wanted me to join as an employee, and I kind of refused. And the same notion too, just noted how their management team is very much rah-rah, right? Really like I don't need that motivation. Like, I don't need to be like a pat on the back. Thank you, Larry, for your hard work.
Sure.
But meanwhile, there truly are other employees that do need that. I mean, for me personally, that's not what motivates me. I'm self-motivated, and that's definitely a good indicator of an entrepreneur too. Is no one's gonna kick your butt in the morning to get you up and do things. You got to be driven to do the stuff, and it's not necessarily financial either, right? It's driven to want to succeed at a personal level, and it is much different than going to a job 9 to 5. I mean, I've had many friends over the years that worked a 9 to 5 job, and they can't wait until that 5 p.m. on Friday until the weekend hits.
Yep.
And I've worked as an entrepreneur. There's the blurring of the weekends, the weekdays, and what time of day it is.
Yeah. There is no such thing really,
No.
especially early. So early on, you can't do that. It gets a little easier as you get a bigger team. Going back to when you sold Investor Junkie, what did that tax bill feel like? Were you pissed?
Oof. Especially being a New York State resident. I figured it out. The amount of just from that sale alone, I could have literally bought the condo that I bought in West Palm Beach.
Dang. Just gone in taxes.
Just poof, gone. And you go, I've literally paid more in one bulk period than most people pay ever in their whole entire life.
Yeah.
To New York State alone. Or even forget about just overall, even federally. And it's painful. I mean, that kind of it definitely is a wake-up call if you, especially if you have a mass, cash out like that. That you question things like how effective your city, state, federal governments are with that money. You laugh, but it's true though, because it's such a.
I'm laughing because you told me one time, like the Porsche, as you're driving it over the roads of like New York and New Jersey, like how bad the roads are, and it pisses you off.
They are horrible. I mean, they recently paved some local roads here, but I'm like, I've gotten my my Mercedes has low profile tires, and I actually had a crack in one of the rims.
Ooh.
Nowadays in New York, they at least for most dealers they get you car rim insurance or tire insurance, because that's how bad the roads are. Like the roads are so bad that it's not uncommon to have to replace a rim or rebalance it or fix the rim or replace a tire because you got a flat because of you got a blowout.
Sure.
I got a blowout of all the cars. I got a blowout in my Escalade from hitting a pothole. Think about that. The size of those tires and rims. I got literally a blowout from an Escalade. From hitting a pothole.
What if they could have taken your tax dollars and fixed that road?
So it's a painful exercise. I mean, it's like my wife has the different mindset of that. Is like, well, just look at you're be thankful you can afford to pay for that type of tax. But it would be great. What more effective way to use that money than giving it doling out to the government, as opposed to if you really were, my thoughts are give it to a charity instead.
Sure. Yeah, if you had that choice, if you had the
I
choice,
had two, if I had
that way.
two, or better yet, let's say you even had a better choice of, all right, let's say you're still in favor of paying taxes to the government, but where can you allocate that money to? Like,
Right.
I want to put it to this, and this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you can't do that. They just take
Can't
it
do
from
that
you.
at all.
They just take it.
So, yeah, I mean, and the thing that's really after selling too, right? The thing we can definitely talk about is, you know, 1 minute you have, a steady income,
Oh,
and
yeah.
next minute you don't.
That's an interesting thing. I always tell people, because people have asked me like if I was going to sell my company and things like that. And I've always said I'm not really even interested at this point, because I've seen every single person that I know, all my friends that have sold their companies, they go through a very tough period of their entire life changes. They don't know what they want to do next. They seem to kind of lose a little bit of like purpose, not long term, but like there's a short term kind of like, what am I even doing here? Like what's the point of what I'm doing? What am I going to do? Like, did you go through all that?
Totally. I mean, it's weird in the sense of, I mean, at least I'm of the mindset of I don't ever want to formally retire, right? To me, retire, what is it in Latin? I think means death. And,
Yeah.
I have no desire to formally ever retire. That being said, yeah, obviously I have the means that if I didn't want to have to work again, I don't have to. But, to me, like you said, staying engaged, having goals, it's the classic of when the Apollo moon landing, when they finally landed on the moon. After they landed, they got depressed because of like, okay, they did this huge accomplishment. What's next? You kind of have to have that next
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah. Non sequitur. Do you think we actually landed on the moon?
Yes, I think we landed
Okay.
on the moon. I'm not one of those. Same thing with and terrorists hit the Twin Towers too. So I don't have any of those conspiracy theories. I mean,
No
there are other
conspiracies.
conspiracy theories. I maybe like, let's say, aliens.
Oh, dude, we could do a whole episode. I could bring you back on. We could do a whole episode on aliens. I am convinced that there are aliens, but
Totally, I think so too.
100%. But that's neither here nor there. Back to money.
So that being said, the thing that's hard, forget about even the goal issue at the moment for, not having, like you go from, I mean, granted, I was really successful with Investor Junkie. I did really well financially from the selling of the business. On top of, it wasn't a stressful, it was much less stressful than having the hosting business. It was very enjoyable. I really enjoyed it. But I also realized that the market was going to change on top of, if I wanted to be I sold also because if I wanted to be a bigger business, I knew the business had to be much different than what it was revenue-wise.
Sure.
It had to be comprised much differently than what it was. And, I have this offer on the table. Why not just sell it and cash out, take my chips off the table and then do something else?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
What is next? Right now, I mean, you're doing LarryLudwig.com.
So I've been doing consulting. I have now LinkClicky as well, which is for affiliate marketing.
That's right. I think I was the
selling
first
that.
customer, right? Was I the first
Yeah.
customer? Or some. I was close. Yeah.
Probably close. I don't remember who came on first. But in terms of that, the ironic thing is, I sold Investor Junkie, and they didn't consider that part of the technology, the affiliate tracking that I built, to be that worthwhile, or they already said they had something in-house. So I'm like, I want to make sure that's, taken out of it because they didn't equate to be worth anything. So I'm like, I want that out of the equation. I want to own that. And, took that technology and been building that technology over the past 5 years to where it's, now a fully fledged product. Because if originally it was built on another piece of software for link tracking that when I decided to shut down in March and had a month literally to build something, built something, and now have a full-fledged product.
You do. What are you doing with it? Like, what's the next big goal? You said you have to have goals. What's the next one?
The goal is to, right now, there's some final touches I want to do for that software where I can really sell it in mass, right? It's functional, obviously. You use it. I use it.
Yeah.
And I have other clients using it. But it wasn't, when I had to put it together in a month, I had to cut corners. So there's features and functionality there were missing at the, changing of passwords, a simple thing.
Sure. Yeah.
I just want to get the thing working and have you guys functional, right? That was my core issue. On top of missing reports and some other features. So most of those things are in place. Once I have the final touches in the next few weeks, start really promoting it. The problem I've always had, and I told you this in a mastermind you and I have had, is how big of an audience is there for affiliate marketing, right? That there is, on one hand, I think the tool, pretty much every client who's used it has said how invaluable it is. On the other hand, it's not a huge, affiliate marketing, while you and I and others do really, other friends we have as well do very successful at it. There are very few and far between affiliate marketers that do well. I mean, that's I think akin to most businesses as well. But it's not. It's a sub niche of a sub niche is the problem, of maybe even a sub niche. So it's not a large audience of affiliate marketers that could use this product.
Right. Could you make it like an enterprise solution? Like, is it?
It sort of is already, right, Bob? I mean, I've thought about contacting some of the bigger publishing houses, right? You know as well as I do, right? The market for affiliate marketing is changing.
Oh, sure.
SEO, search engine optimization is changing, and I think that's also an opportunity, right? I mean, most affiliate marketers rely on organic traffic, and on top of that, cross their fingers and hope that Google doesn't change the algorithm. And if they do, they're screwed, right? Again, it's a huge black box for them that they don't really know what pages are generating revenue, what pages are making them money, which affiliates are making them the most money from what sources, right? It's just pretty much, they put up links, spray and pray is the common terminology they use, is they put a bunch of links on their website, blog, or anywhere else for that matter, and hope things convert, yet not knowing where that conversion's happening. And it's kind of scary in the sense of from a business owner, right? That's kind of what that problem I was solving years ago when I had it on Investor Junkie was I wanted to treat these things as if it was my own products, right? In other words, if I knew what pages made money, what pages didn't make money, where's the source of this revenue coming from? Was it coming from organic traffic or paid traffic or social media or YouTube, what have you? And that's what my tool now does.
Man, I have a lot of questions that I could ask you. I want to have you back on the podcast like multiple times because I want to talk to you about aliens and I want to talk to you about personal finance influencers and really just more like deep dive personal finance stuff because a lot of people don't know that, well, I don't tell anybody this, but like I remember right before this was back in quantitative easing times, like you were telling me like, this is what's about to happen. And you were kind of like, you might not even remember this, but you laid out like, here's what's going to happen over the next couple of years when they start raising interest rates. Like these businesses are going to go down. This is going to happen. And that stuff all happened. It's like, so I want to talk more about that. But yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on the first inaugural episode. And where can people find you?
Easiest place is LarryLudwig.com.
Got anything else going on you want anybody to know about? Or is that it?
Just my affiliate software, Linklicky. That's really it at the moment.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, buddy. Have you on again.
Thank you.
All right, later, man.